Hello everyone, myself Swetha, working as an assistant professor in the department of EIE, and I'm going to give my presentation on biomedical instrumentation. In that, the one of the topic is resting and action potential taking place in a cell body. How the resting potential and action potential was taking place. So, certain types of cells within the body, such as nerves and muscle cells, and it was encased in a semi permeable membrane, we are calling as. So, that will permit some substances to pass through the membrane, and while others are kept out. So, some substances, there are so many different types of substances present inside of our human body. So, some kind of fluid cells which was present in our human body is sodium, potassium, and chloride ions. So, surrounding the cells of the body will be, we are calling as a body fluids. The fluids are conductive solutions. So, which will contain charged atoms, we are calling as, it is also known as ions. The principal ions are sodium, potassium, and chloride. The membrane of excited cells readily permits entry of potassium and chloride ions, but effectively blocks the entry of sodium ions. So why? Because of that, what's happening here? There was mutual imbalances might be taking place in between the ions itself. How the imbalances was taking place is here. See, let us take this entire thing as a cell. Okay, in that, inside, negative parts was present, negative, 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 and outside positive ions was there. Okay, so here negative representing chloride and the positive representing sodium and the potassium ions. So here sodium and potassium, whenever it was rushing inside the cell body, okay, here what's happening is, whenever it was rushing inside, so the chloride ions which was already present inside the body was there, and next the sodium and potassium ions which was rushing inside the cell body will not allow the cell through the cell membrane, it will not allow, and so it was kept outside, it was staying outside itself. So intercellular, intracellular will be taking place, inter and intra. Intercellular positive sodium and potassium ions, intracellular negative ions will be present. So because of that, what's happening, the net imbalances will be taking place. So by applying some amount of external energy, the ions will get equalized inside the cell and the outside the cell. That one we are calling as a equilibrium. Whenever the ions was reaching its equilibrium state, here what's happening, some amount of voltage will be generating through the cell. That voltage is nothing but minus 70 millivolts. And the range also is there, it was nearly minus 60 to minus 120 millivolts voltage. In between that, any amount might be there. The net potential which was generating whenever the equilibrium state was, whenever the cell reaching the equilibrium state, okay, this much amount of voltage will be produced. And next, at the time the cell, whenever it was reaching the equilibrium state, at that position we are calling as a, the resting potential was taking place, and this cell which was in that resting potential will be calling as a polarized cell. Okay, and next, the cell will stay as it is in that resting state itself. Okay, whenever it was reaching the equilibrium state, no, and again it will get disturbed by some ionic currents which was applying externally. So whenever the ionic currents was applying to the cell, what will happen? The internal things will get disturbed. Okay, so accordingly, see here in this diagram. So sodium ions, by applying some amount of ionic current with that external energy, the sodium ions and the potassium ions will get, the sodium ions will be rushing inside this cell and the potassium ions will be leaving outside the cell. Okay, before that what we have discussed, the cell will not allowing the sodium ions inside the cell membrane. So because of that, high amount of chloride ions will be present inside this cell, less amount of potassium, so that's why it was negligible. So negative ions was there in the inside and the positive ion sodium atoms will be there in the outside of the cell. Okay. So here, whenever the ionic current was applied, the sodium ions rushed. So many sodium ions was rushing inside the cell. Because of that, what's happening? The positive voltage will be generating inside the cell and the chloride ions will be which was leaving outside the cell, because the sodium ions whenever it was rushing inside, it will generating extra positive ions inside the cell. Okay, so the chloride ions will get negligible and it was leaving the outside the cell. Because of that, what's happening? See this one, positive ions was the high amount of positive ions was present inside the cell and the negative ions was there. Chloride ions, high amount of chloride ions will be outside the cell. So because of that, some amount of this imbalance will generate some amount of voltage. That one will be plus 20 millivolts. And this cell at this position will be calling as a depolarized cell. And the potential which was generating in this state will be calling as an action potential, because some amount of external energy was applied. Due to that, the cell will get imbalanced. So the external energy was applied, that one will be calling as an action potential. Okay. So here I had given some detailed explanation right up part here in this slide itself. So once the rush of the sodium ions through the cell membrane has stopped, what was happened? The ionic currents that lowers the barrier, the strength of the barrier will get lower. And next, remaining ions will get rushed inside. And after that, whenever it was reaching the action potential depolarization state also, it will not stay there, because the external energy will not stay until, okay, so a long time or like that. So this external energy also will get loosened up. And next, again what will happen? It will reback to the original state. That one will be calling as again resting potential. Okay, so likewise the action potential and resting potential will be taking place in the step by step manner. Okay, so here, and one more thing, we can talk about the repolarization of a cell. Here what was happening? One active process which we are calling as a sodium pump. Here the sodium ions are quickly transported to the outside of the cell and the cell again becomes polarized and assumes it is a resting potential. That one will be calling as a repolarization of the cell. So here we can tell directly the rate of pumping is directly proportional to the sodium concentration in the cell. Okay, how much it is pumping and how much it is releasing, okay, inside, outside, okay, external energy when it is applied. So each and every action is taking place here itself. And whatever the method you are applying, it is nothing but the action potential is always the same for any given cell. This is also we are calling as all or nothing law. This one will be calling as. And here in shortcut I will discuss entire thing process which we had dealt here itself. So first one, what we are telling, resting state, right? Okay, so at that time what's happening? The cell will be calling as a polarized cell. And whenever after the resting state, after stimulation means nothing but what we are dealing with, some amount of ionic current we had applied. That one will be calling as a stimulation. And after stimulation, what was happening? This cell will get excited and the sodium ions, sodium ions inside, chloride ions outside. That state will be calling as depolarization. Okay, and this one already started, and next here itself it was completed, depolarization. So complete, positive ions inside, negative ions outside. And next, it will stay longer? No. The atom energy will get loosened up. Okay, slowly. Continuously we can't provide energy. So whenever it loses some amount of energy, what was happening? Repolarization will be taking place. Means again same. Negative ions inside and positive ions outside. Slowly it will start. So here it had started and now it's ended here itself. So it's a cyclic process. Resting potential, action potential, polarization, depolarization, next repolarization. So likewise the actions was taking place inside the cells of a human body. So this one, this diagram is representing bioelectric potential. Okay, so first what's happening? Minus 70 millivolts here, depolarization of a cell has taken place and it was reaching to plus 30 or 20 millivolts, and next action potential here itself taking place. Next again it was decreasing. It will not stay longer at the action potential only, right? So the energy will get loosened up and next it will slowly decrease. That state will be calling as a repolarization state, and sudden decrement, and next again it will goes to the resting potential. So I hope you understood this topic well, how the resting and action potential was taking place inside of our human body. Thank you.
Like, share, comment, and subscribe VNR Digital Learning Resource YouTube channel.